Imagine standing before one of the strongest fortified cities of the Byzantine Empire. Stone walls rise higher than any building most of your soldiers have ever seen. Towers line the perimeter, each one packed with archers watching the horizon. Behind those walls sit granaries full of food, wells full of water, and a garrison that has never once had to fear a desert army. Now imagine you are outside those walls with only a few thousand men. You have no siege engines, no catapults, no towers of your own. Your soldiers have marched for days across brutal terrain. Some are exhausted, some are hungry. And somewhere behind you, other Muslim armies are still trying to reach this same city, racing against time before Roman reinforcements arrive. This was the reality facing the Muslims in the year 634. The Byzantine Empire still controlled the major cities of Syria. Its wealth, its armies, and its centuries of imperial power made it one of the two superpowers of the known world. For the small, fast-moving Muslim forces pushing north out of Arabia, capturing a single fortified Byzantine city was not just a military objective. It was a test of whether this entire campaign could survive its first real challenge. Bosra stood in their path. Bosra was no ordinary town. It was the capital of the Ghassanid Arabs, Christian allies of Byzantium, and one of the great trading cities linking Arabia to the Roman world. If Bosra held, the momentum of the Muslim advance into Syria could stall before it truly began. If Bosra fell, it would become the first major Byzantine city ever captured by the Muslims, a signal to every other city in Syria that the impossible was now possible. Inside those walls waited a disciplined Byzantine garrison, allied Ghassanid soldiers who knew the desert as well as any Arab, and the quiet hope that Roman reinforcements were already on the way. Outside those walls waited a commander whose name had already begun to spread fear through Byzantine ranks. A man who, in the months before, had led his army across one of the most feared deserts in Arabia in a single, relentless march that seemed almost impossible to believe. His name was Khalid ibn al-Walid. May Allah be pleased with him. The fate of the Syrian campaign now depended on one city, one commander, and a test of faith that would decide whether the Muslim advance into the heart of the Byzantine Empire had truly begun, or whether it would end here, at the gates of Bosra. To understand why Bosra mattered so much, you have to understand what was happening across Syria in these opening months of 634 CE. The Muslim advance into Syria was not a single army moving as one unit. It was several separate corps, each dispatched under its own commander, each tasked with a different objective, each vulnerable if caught alone. Commanders like Amr ibn al-As, Shurabil ibn Hassana, and Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan were operating in different regions, probing Byzantine defenses, testing the strength of the empire's outer provinces. This was both an opportunity and a danger. An opportunity because it allowed the Muslims to strike at multiple points and stretch Byzantine attention across a wide front. A danger because any one of these smaller forces could be isolated and crushed by a concentrated Byzantine response before the others could arrive to help. The Byzantines understood this vulnerability perfectly. Their strategy was simple in theory: prevent the scattered Muslim forces from uniting and destroy them piece by piece before they could combine into something too large to stop. This is exactly what made Bosra so important. Bosra was not just another town on the map. It was the political capital of the Ghassanid Arabs, a Christian Arab kingdom that had served as a loyal buffer state for Byzantium for generations. It was also a major commercial hub, sitting directly on the trade routes connecting Arabia to Syria and the wider Roman world. Merchants, caravans, and goods had passed through its gates for centuries. Strategically, Bosra was a gateway. Taking it would not just remove a threat. It would open the road deeper into Byzantine territory, giving the Muslims a secure base from which to launch further operations. Leaving it in Byzantine hands would mean leaving a hostile, well-defended stronghold sitting directly on the Muslim army's flank, capable of threatening supply lines and troop movements for as long as the campaign continued. Every Muslim commander in the region understood the same truth. The armies needed to unite, and they needed to unite around a target that would deliver both a strategic and a psychological victory. Bosra was that target. The question was no longer whether the Muslims would move against Bosra. The question was whether they could get there, and whether they would have enough strength to take it before the Byzantines could organize a response that would end the campaign before it truly started. Khalid moved to link up with the other Muslim commanders already in the region. Every day spent separated was another day the Byzantines might use to concentrate their forces and strike first. Communication between commanders had to happen quickly. Decisions had to be made without the luxury of long deliberation. Coordination between separate Muslim corps, each with its own supply situation and its own local knowledge, had to be handled with precision. The terrain did not make this easy. Southern Syria in this period was a mix of rocky plains, scattered settlements, and long stretches of exposed ground offering little cover and less water. Soldiers who had already endured the desert crossing from Iraq now faced yet another demanding march. Supplies were limited. Uncertainty hung over every step. Uncertainty about Byzantine troop movements. Uncertainty about whether reinforcements from Rome had already arrived. Uncertainty about whether the other Muslim commanders would reach the rendezvous point in time. And yet morale held. This is where Khalid's leadership became decisive. He was not a commander who directed his army from a distance. He rode with his troops, shared their hardships, and made decisions on the ground rather than from behind. His reputation for decisive, calm leadership under pressure had already spread through the ranks after the desert crossing. Soldiers who might have doubted the campaign found steadiness in a commander who never seemed to hesitate, never seemed to panic, and always seemed to know the next move. Flexibility mattered as much as decisiveness. Plans that worked in Iraq did not automatically work in Syria. Khalid adjusted his approach based on terrain, based on intelligence about Byzantine positions, and based on the changing needs of an army that was still finding its footing in unfamiliar territory. Step by step, the Muslim forces closed the distance. Then, rising on the horizon, walls appeared. Thick, fortified, ancient. The city of Bosra came into view, and with it, the moment every soldier in that army had been marching toward. Behind those walls, a very different mood prevailed. Bosra was an impressive fortified city by any standard of its time. Its walls had been built and reinforced over generations, designed to withstand exactly the kind of siege that was now approaching. Towers gave defenders clear lines of sight in every direction. Gates could be sealed and held by disciplined soldiers trained for exactly this kind of defense. Inside, the population was a mix of civilians going about daily life. Byzantine soldiers stationed as part of the empire's regional garrison, and Ghassanid Arab forces, Christian Arabs allied with Byzantium, who knew the surrounding desert terrain as well as any force in the region. Many inside those walls simply did not believe the Muslim army posed a serious threat. This was not unreasonable confidence. Bosra had stood for generations. Its walls had never fallen to an Arab raiding force, and to many defenders, That is exactly what this looked like. A raid, not a full military campaign capable of taking a fortified city. The Muslim army, however impressive its recent marches had been, was still small compared to the resources Byzantium could theoretically bring to bear. Preparations for a siege moved forward with a sense of calm rather than panic. Grain stores were checked. Gates were reinforced. Soldiers took their positions along the walls. And underlying all of it was a quiet hope that Roman reinforcements might arrive before the situation became desperate. This contrast is what made the coming weeks so tense. Inside the walls, confidence, tradition, and the belief that fortified stone would do what it had always done. Outside the walls, a smaller force, driven by conviction, discipline, and a commander who had already proven he did not follow the expected script. Two very different mindsets were about to collide. The opening phase of any siege is a test of patience as much as strength. It was methodical positioning, securing key points around the city, watching the gates, and preventing any surprise sortie from catching the Muslim army off guard. This kind of warfare demanded a different mindset than open field battle. In the open desert, speed and maneuver had been the Muslim army's greatest weapons. The ability to strike fast, exploit gaps, and outpace an enemy's ability to respond. A siege reversed much of that advantage. Walls could not be outmaneuvered. Patience became as important as courage. Soldiers who had thrived on decisive, fast-moving combat now had to adjust to a slower, more grinding form of pressure. Coordination between commanders became critical during this phase. Multiple Muslim leaders were now present in the region. A determined, coordinated pressure applied steadily against a well-defended city. Days passed. Tension built. Neither side broke. And beneath the surface of this waiting game, both sides understood what was coming. Sooner or later, the standoff would have to be resolved by a decisive confrontation. At a critical point in the siege, the garrison launched a sortie, a direct engagement outside the city walls, likely an attempt to break the encirclement or inflict enough damage to force the Muslim army to withdraw. This was a calculated risk. Staying purely defensive meant slowly losing ground and morale. Striking outward meant a chance to change the momentum of the entire siege in a single engagement. Khalid's response was immediate. Cavalry moved to counter the sortie, cutting off the defenders' ability to strike and retreat safely behind their walls. Infantry lines held their positions, absorbing pressure while cavalry maneuvered to flank and contain the Byzantine and Ghassanid forces who had come out to fight. For a time, the outcome remained genuinely uncertain. This is one of the most important truths about the Siege of Bosra. It was not a foregone conclusion. The defenders were skilled. The Ghassanid Arab soldiers among them were experienced desert fighters, not easily overwhelmed. Byzantine soldiers were disciplined and well-equipped. Any command mistake, any gap in the Muslim lines, could have turned the engagement in the defenders' favor. Khalid's battlefield leadership became the deciding factor. He reacted quickly to shifts in the fighting, reinforcing weak points before they could be exploited, and directing cavalry to strike where the defenders were most exposed.
How long must we wait under these walls? Until Bosra falls, brother. Patience.
As the engagement continued, pressure mounted steadily against the defenders. The sortie failed to break the siege. Losses accumulated. The hope of quick Roman reinforcement did not materialize in time to change the outcome. Facing a siege they could not break, and reinforcements that had not arrived, Bosra's defenders made the decision to negotiate. The fall of Bosra was not simply a matter of the walls being breached and the city being overrun. It was a negotiated capitulation, a recognition by the defenders that continued resistance offered no realistic path to victory. Bosra, one of the great fortified cities of the Byzantine frontier, had fallen. The fall of Bosra changed the entire character of the Syrian campaign. This was the first major Byzantine city captured by the Muslims, and that fact alone carried enormous weight. Word of Bosra's fall spread quickly across the region, carrying with it a psychological impact that went far beyond the strategic value of the city itself. For the Byzantines, the loss was deeply unsettling. Bosra had been considered a secure frontier stronghold, defended by capable Byzantine soldiers and experienced Ghassanid allies. Its fall raised uncomfortable questions throughout the empire's Syrian provinces. If Bosra could not hold, could any city be considered truly safe? For the Muslims, the victory provided something just as valuable as territory: confidence. An army that had already proven itself capable of extraordinary desert marches had now proven it could take a fortified Byzantine city as well. This victory strengthened morale, not just among the soldiers who had fought at Bosra, but across the entire Muslim campaign in Syria. Strategically, Bosra gave the Muslims something they had not possessed before: a secure, captured base deep in territory that had previously belonged entirely to the Byzantine sphere of influence. This opened southern Syria to further Muslim operations, and gave commanders a foothold from which to plan the campaign's next moves. Bosra's fall did not end the Syrian campaign. It began its next chapter.